I would die a happy man if I never read another basic goblin stat block in a TTRPG ever again. Hi, I'm Peter, creator and lead designer of Tales from Elsewhere. I've been playing tabletop role-playing games for about 26 years now, and whenever I open up a new fantasy RPG and read the goblin stat block that they've included, I always just compare it to the first goblin stat block I ever read. So let's talk about monster design and legacy. A few weeks ago, I had Davi from Mystic Arts over on my channel. I did a live interview with him where we talked about adventure design and monster design, and something we got into at one point was the idea of goblin stat blocks and how the baseline is just kind of uninteresting. And that got me thinking, what was the goblin like in 3rd edition D&D 26 years ago when I first was introduced to it? So I still have all my 3rd edition books, and my copy of the PHB is falling apart at this point. But on page 6 of the appendix, where it goes into some basic monsters, we have a goblin, which is a small humanoid that has 4 HP, a speed of 30, AC 15, can attack with a Morning Star at +0 in melee, or throw a javelin with +2 ranged. Morning Star is a D8 -1, javelin is a D6 -1 damage. Looks like it has some dark vision. Its, reflexes are decent, like its dex. It can sneak kind of well with its skills. And then it goes, actually, for most of the page, talking about the goblin ideology, their society, and how they approach combat. But it's really just, like, the most basic of stat blocks around. And that's really what a goblin's supposed to be, right? They're supposed to be these low-level threats that are kind of weak, but sneaky. They use ambush tactics. They hide and then they throw javelins at you from the bushes or something like that, right? That's the classic goblin in my mind. Well, let's see how maybe that gets iterated on with a more recent game like Shadowdark. So I've got my copy of Shadowdark right here, and page 221 has the goblin. So the basic goblin has an AC of 11, 5 HP, and they have a +0 club for a D4 damage, or a short bow, which is +1 to hit for a D4 damage. They can't be surprised is their special ability. They have keen senses, but otherwise it's basically the same as it was 20 years prior to the release of this game. The 5th edition goblin is roughly the same. We've got a little bit more HP. It's got 7 now, and its AC is back up to 15 again. It's got a scimitar this time and a short bow. And I thought the scimitar is a little odd, because does that mean the goblins are actually decent metalworkers now, rather than just basically a club with spikes on it? But it's got a new feature, Nimble Escape. That's a little flavorful, right? Uses a bonus action to basically have a rogue feature to run and hide. But it's largely the same as it was, right? And what I'm getting at with the mentioning of these specific editions of games that all follow in the same ideology is that I didn't really need the new stat block. I mean, really, is there that much difference between my 3rd edition goblin and the 5th edition goblin? In one case, the weapon damages are slightly shifted, like the balance is slightly changed, but really, substantively, this is the same creature used in the same circumstances that I didn't really need the stat block for in the first place. And now, I'm not saying these are poorly designed creatures. I know that they're designed to be simple to run because they're basic enemies. But I think something that these stat blocks don't articulate well is how the goblins threaten the players. Because that's the heart of what a monster should be. What sort of threat do they present? And the way the goblins are written is they're sneaky little guys, but substantively, they're just cannon fodder. They're not written to present a particular threat, apart from maybe, I guess, they ambush. That's what we can surmise from it. They like an unfair fight. But the actual mechanics of the goblin are fairly rudimentary. And I get it. That's the point of the goblin. But what I'm also saying is, why print that in the book if you're just going to mostly copy-paste the same stat block I had 26 years ago? For example, going back to Shadowdark, on page 221, right below the goblin, this basic goblin stat block, there's also a goblin boss. Really, I was like, oh cool, maybe it'll be like a leader of goblins or something like that, and well, no, it's just scaled up slightly. AC, HP, damage and all that is a little bit better, and that's kind of it. What I will say is a successful monster entry is the Goblin Shaman, because it has a group of spells that are very evocative. It has Bug Brain, which reduces your int to 1, which is hilarious. It has Skitter, which lets it climb walls like a spider, and it can do a Stink Bomb spell. all of that is pretty evocative and interesting and paints a picture as to what the goblins are and how it's threatening the players. Like, this weird little goblin shaman is going to mess with your head and make you stinky, and this communicates something apart from just raw stats. And I think that some of these stat blocks actually work against the accessibility of the hobby to new players. And I'll explain what I mean by that. I've been playing fantasy games for a very long time. I know what a goblin is, I know how they behave, that's why I don't really need these stat blocks. But if I'm a new player cracking open a book for the first time, and I just really have these stats, this simple scimitar and shortbow and nimble escape with 7 HP and 15 AC, this isn't communicating to me how this goblin threatens the players, what's interesting about them, how I need to use them. The stats themselves aren't necessarily telling me an interesting story. I'd have to surmise that from them. Because a lot of the more recent monster books don't include a lot of tactical advice within these stat blocks. It's something I'm seeing kind of moving away in some books. And so a new player cracking this open won't understand the utility of this goblin at the end of the day. When the goblin attack just says, Morning Star 1d8 -1, this isn't helping this new player immerse themselves in the players in the fiction, in the story of this combat and how the goblin fights. There's not a lot of evocation here or anything flashy. It's relying entirely on me as the DM to flesh out this creature into something interesting, because out of the box, it's kind of boring. And it doesn't take a lot, I think, to move the goblins into something more interesting. 4th edition D&D did a very good job with this, as there's different types of goblins, they have different roles, and they all have very different mechanics. But if we don't want to get that complicated, even just naming certain things for the goblin makes a huge difference. For example, in Shadowdark, if the goblin's club said, club with nails in it, that already communicates something much more interesting than just a basic club. Or if the scimitar was a rusty scimitar, and the short bow was crude short bow. All of this starts communicating something, even if we aren't drastically changing the mechanics. And if you give every goblin some sort of little trap or goo pot or something that they can use to mess with the players, it's starting to tell more of a story and starting to communicate how these little critters are supposed to threaten the players. I mean, let's be real, it's no surprise that one of the most common homebrew packs of monsters are goblinoids. It's one of the most common things you'll see on like DM's Guild or any of these spots, other content creators like me, is they're making more interesting goblins. Because the goblin in the book is kind of useless. It's just a vacuous stat block of the most basic information that you don't even really need to look at the book to run, because the goblin's not very good at most things, and they only have about the amount of HP for one hit from a player, and then they're toast. So what's the point of that stat block? And now look, I know I'm ranting here a little bit, and those who've watched my channel for a while know that this is a big pet peeve of mine, is kind of tepid monster design. And the one that's always driven me the most crazy is the zombie. And it really bothers me how Legacy traps us into certain design spaces. Just because the zombie has always had a slam attack doesn't mean every edition of D&D and all of its spin-offs need to give the zombie a slam attack. Name me one piece of fiction that uses traditional zombies where the zombies punch things to death. I dare you. And you know, just because I didn't remember what it was in Shadowdark, I cracked open Shadowdark and looked at its stat block. No, it has a slam attack. To this day, it still just punches things. And that's what I mean by legacy. The goblin is largely unmodified from its original state across editions of D&D and a lot of D20 fantasies, because that's the way it always has been. And controversially maybe, I don't think you need to print another stat block of a goblin or a zombie if it's going to function the same way it has since I got into role-playing games as a teenager almost 30 years ago. And so this leads me into the challenge of this video. The challenge to you, whether you're a homebrewer, a game designer, or what have you, is to make your monsters weird. If you're gonna add something to this space, try to walk on new ground. Try to show me something I've never seen before. Give me a monster that'll be like, wow, I have not seen that before. hit me with that stuff. I go to the monster sections in new role-playing games almost first. I usually do that before I look at anything else because I want to see what sort of threats and horrors I can unleash on my players. And when I see a bunch of stuff that is largely the same as all the copies of D&D and its spin-offs that I own, I'm like, well, there's a whole bunch of this book that I didn't really need to buy. And so I'd like to know your thoughts on this. Do you have examples of really interesting goblins that you found, or games where the monster design doesn't feel rote? It doesn't feel like they're going down a checklist of classics just to reprint them for reprinting's sake. I'd love to know the weirdest things you have out there that you've purchased or seen, because that's the stuff I love. Give me weird stuff that does unexpected things. Because I've got the monster manual basically committed to memory at this point. I play so much. Give me something new. Tell me about it in the comments. I'd love to hear. This is the kind of video I do every other week on this channel, and if you found it entertaining or informative or maybe disagreed with me, consider hitting the like and subscribe buttons. It really helps out the channel and get more people talking about these sort of game design principles. And if you'd like to see my own take on monster design, consider checking out our Patreon and our Kickstarter page, where you'll see more information about the weird monsters and the artwork I get for them, as my game, Tales from Elsewhere Clockworld, is full of very strange monsters indeed. Anyway, thanks folks for watching, and I'll see you here next time on Tales from Elsewhere.